The meeting hall was silent. Representatives from 47 different alien worlds sat in their designated seats waiting. Ambassador Zixthar stepped forward, his body made of crystal that caught the light and threw rainbows across the walls. He looked nervous, which was unusual for someone of his status. "We need to talk about the humans," he said, and everyone in the room shifted uncomfortably. Every species present had heard the stories. Some had even encountered humans directly and lived to tell about it. The tales were always the same. Humans were unpredictable, aggressive, and seemingly impossible to kill. They came from a planet that should have destroyed any intelligent life long before it evolved. Yet somehow they had survived and thrived. A bird-like alien named Krisha stood up, her colorful feathers standing on end. "The humans joined our council only 3 years ago. In that short time, we have received 7 formal incident reports. 7 separate occasions where humans have caused diplomatic problems." The large screen at the center of the room came to life. It showed a blue and green planet slowly rotating in space. Earth. To anyone who didn't know better, it looked like a peaceful garden world. But the species in this room knew the truth. Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world, one of the most dangerous planet types in the known galaxy. Zixthar began listing facts that made several aliens physically recoil. Earth has gravity 20% stronger than the galactic standard. The oxygen levels in their atmosphere would poison 60% of the species in this room. They have thousands of different predator species, diseases beyond count, extreme weather that kills thousands every year, volcanic activity, earthquakes, hurricanes, and yet humans call it home. They don't just survive there. Krisha added quietly. They love it there. They think it's beautiful. The screen changed to show humanity's expansion into space. In less than 100 years since they discovered faster-than-light travel, humans had built colonies on 17 different worlds. 3 of those worlds were planets that the Council had officially declared uninhabitable for intelligent life. Commander Jake Morrison was sitting in his ship, completely unaware that the entire Galactic Council was discussing his species, like they were a dangerous animal that needed to be controlled. He was only 28 years old, which was young for a ship commander, but humanity's rapid growth among the stars demanded young leaders. His ship, the Defiant, carried 200 crew members, all of them eager and excited about their mission. "Commander, we're getting close to Helios Station," said Lieutenant Amy Clark from her seat at the navigation controls. "We'll arrive in 15 minutes. Morrison nodded and stretched his arms above his head. The motion would have terrified most alien species, who would see it as an aggressive threat display. But to Morrison, it was just a normal stretch after sitting too long. "I need coffee before we dock," he said.
"Anyone else want some?"
Several crew members raised their hands. Coffee had become somewhat legendary in certain parts of the galaxy. There were stories about a human trader who had used coffee as a weapon during a riot. The concentrated caffeine had knocked out 6 alien security guards who tried to drink it. Lieutenant Danny Cooper walked onto the bridge, still looking half asleep. "Did I miss anything important?" "Just another boring trip through space," Morrison replied with a smile. "Though I heard we're picking up some interesting cargo at Helios. Something about biology samples from the outer rim." What Morrison didn't know was that the station administrator, a nervous alien named Pix Eel, had been dreading their arrival. The cargo wasn't biology samples at all. It was survivors. 3 days ago, a colony ship carrying 400 civilians had been attacked by space pirates. The only ship close enough to help was a human mining vessel called Betty's Pride. It had a crew of only 12 humans who were supposed to be mining asteroids for rare metals. The miners had attacked the pirates. With a mining ship. With equipment designed to break rocks, not fight battles. The pirates had run away in terror after the humans used industrial cutting lasers and mining explosives in ways that no sane engineer would recommend. The civilian aliens had been rescued and brought to Helios Station, where they spent 3 days telling increasingly wild stories about their human rescuers. They didn't even have real weapons. One survivor kept repeating to anyone who would listen. They used mining tools. One of them, a woman named Katie, went outside in just a spacesuit and cut through the pirate ship's engine with a handheld torch. During the battle, she was laughing. Pixeel had sent these reports to the Council, adding to the growing file about human behavior. the file that was currently being reviewed in an emergency meeting. Meanwhile, on Earth, Director Helen Grant was preparing for her own difficult meeting. The Galactic Council had requested a formal discussion about humanity's integration into galactic society, which was diplomatic language for, "We're scared of you and we need to talk about it." Grant was in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and sharp gray eyes. She had been a diplomat for 30 years and had been expecting this conversation for months. She knew how humanity looked to other species in the galaxy. "They're going to ask us to slow down our expansion," predicted her assistant, Marcus Webb, reading through the meeting agenda on his electronic pad. "Maybe even ask us to limit our military." "Let them ask," Grant replied calmly. "We haven't broken a single council law. Every colony we established was on unclaimed worlds or legally purchased territory. Our military only exists for self-defense and stopping pirates." "That's technically true," Webb admitted. "But in the last year alone, human ships have gotten involved in 7 piracy incidents, 2 border disputes, and 1 attempted genocide. We keep accidentally becoming heroes and it's making everyone nervous." Grant smiled slightly. "Accidentally? Well, we keep finding situations where someone needs help and we help them. Very aggressively, very violently. Marcus, we come from a world where literally everything tried to kill us for millions of years. When we see someone being threatened, our instinct isn't to form a committee and debate proper procedures. Our instinct is to stop the threat immediately." Grant stood and straightened her suit. "But I'll be diplomatic about it. That's what I'm paid for." The Defiant approached Helios Station and Morrison received an unexpected message from Earth Command. He was ordered to proceed to the Council homeworld immediately after loading his cargo. Director Grant specifically requested his presence. "Any idea what this is about?" asked Lieutenant Clark. Morrison shook his head. "No clue. But if the director wants us there, it must be important." Through the ship's windows, Helios Station came into view. It was a massive ring-shaped structure that served as a trading hub for multiple species. Morrison had always found it beautiful, a symbol of different civilizations working together peacefully. He had no idea that in the council chambers, representatives were voting on whether humanity should be classified as a potential threat to galactic peace. The vote was much closer than anyone expected. Almost half the council wanted restrictions placed on human activity. The other half argued that humans hadn't actually broken any laws and were, in fact, making the galaxy safer by their aggressive anti-piracy actions. "The problem," Zixthar argued during the debate, "is not what humans have done. It's what they could do. They are a Deathworld species with advanced technology and no apparent fear of death. They throw themselves into dangerous situations that any sensible species would avoid. What happens when they decide they want something we have? What happens when their interests conflict with ours?" An elderly alien named Torval, who had been part of the council for decades, stood slowly. "I understand the fear. Humans are different from any species we've encountered, but let us consider what we've actually seen. Yes, they're aggressive. Yes, they're dangerous. But in every documented case, they've used that aggression to protect others. They stop pirates. They defend the weak. They cannot seem to ignore injustice even when it would be safer to do so." "That's exactly what concerns me," Zixthar replied. "They cannot ignore injustice, which means they will involve themselves in situations that don't concern them. They will take action based on their moral code, not our laws." "Then perhaps our laws need to be better," Torval said quietly, and several council members made sounds of agreement. The debate continued for hours with no clear resolution. Finally, the council agreed on a compromise. They would create a joint expedition to investigate something that had recently been discovered. Something that would test humanity's capabilities and their character. If humans could work cooperatively with other species on a dangerous scientific mission, it would prove they could be trusted. If they couldn't, well, the council would have justification for imposing restrictions. As Morrison docked at Helios Station, completely unaware of the political situation, he received updated orders. After loading the cargo, the Defiant was to proceed directly to the council homeworld. He was to bring his entire senior staff. "This is bigger than I thought," he said to Lieutenant Clark. "Something's happening. Good something or bad something? With politics, it's usually bad, but we'll deal with it." Morrison stood and headed for the cargo bay. "Let's get these survivors settled and see what the council wants from us." The survivors from the pirate attack were waiting in the cargo bay. A mix of different species, all looking traumatized but grateful. When they saw Morrison's uniform, several of them immediately approached. "You're human," one of them said, a statement of fact that carried weight. "I am," Morrison confirmed. "Thank you," the alien said simply. "Your people saved us. They fought for us when they had no reason to. We will not forget." Morrison felt uncomfortable with the gratitude but accepted it gracefully. "We're glad we could help. Any decent person would have done the same." "But they did more than help," another survivor spoke up. "They risked everything. The pirate ship had weapons. Your miners had only tools. They should have died, but they fought anyway." Morrison nodded slowly, beginning to understand why the council might be nervous. To humans, protecting innocent people was just the right thing to do. But to species who had evolved on safer worlds, who had different instincts about risk and survival, human behavior must seem incomprehensible, reckless, dangerous. "We should get going," he said to his crew. "The council is waiting, and we shouldn't keep them waiting too long." As the Defiant left Helios Station and set course for the council homeworld, Morrison looked out at the stars and wondered what test the council had prepared for humanity. Whatever it was, he knew his species would face it head-on, with courage and determination. Because that's what humans did. They faced challenges directly, helped those in need, and refused to give up no matter how bad the odds looked. It was what made them heroes to some species and terrifying to others. Morrison just hoped the council could learn to see humanity as allies rather than threats. Because if there was one thing he knew for certain, it was that humans weren't going to change who they were just to make others comfortable. They were Deathworlders, survivors, protectors, and the galaxy was going to have to accept that. Professor Lisa Bennett had been digging up ancient ruins for 15 years, and she thought she had seen everything. She was wrong. The dig site on Kepler 442b was supposed to be routine work. The ruins spread across a valley, remnants of a civilization that the council called the progenitors. These ancient aliens had died out thousands of years ago, leaving behind massive structures that nobody fully understood. Lisa was carefully brushing dust off a stone tablet when her assistant called out to her. "Professor, you really need to see this." Alex Turner stood in front of a wall covered in detailed carvings. These weren't just decorations. They were warnings. Lisa's translation device processed the ancient writing. The words made her blood run cold. The text described a war that had destroyed multiple civilizations 50,000 years ago. A war between the progenitors and something called the Endless. They came from the dark between stars. Lisa read aloud. They consumed worlds. They could not be killed. The progenitors fought for 10,000 years and barely survived. Then they sealed the Endless away and scattered the keys so they could never return. Alex looked pale. "That sounds like a myth. An old story to scare children." "Maybe," Lisa said. "But myths usually come from real events." She took holographic scans of the wall. "We need to report this to the council immediately." Before she could send the report, her communicator buzzed with an emergency message. All human personnel were being recalled to the council homeworld for an urgent meeting. "What now?" Alex muttered. Lisa didn't know, but she had a bad feeling that her discovery was about to become very important. Commander Morrison arrived at the council homeworld at the same time as a dozen other human ship captains. They were all escorted to a waiting room near the main council chambers. Nobody seemed to know why they had been summoned. "Anyone know what's happening?" asked Captain Victoria Hayes. She commanded a survey ship called the Wanderer and had spent years exploring deep space. She was tall and tough, with short hair and the look of someone who didn't scare easily. "No idea," Morrison admitted. "But this feels serious." Director Helen Grant entered the room with her assistants. Her face was carefully neutral, which Morrison had learned meant the situation was either very good or very bad. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," Grant began. "I'll be direct. The Galactic Council has been debating humanity's place in their organization. Some members are concerned about our methods and our rapid expansion. Frankly, they're concerned about us in general. We haven't done anything wrong," Captain Victoria protested. "No, we haven't. But we're different, and different makes people nervous." Grant activated a holographic display showing recent incident reports. In the past year, human ships have been involved in dozens of conflicts across Council space. In every case, we were legally right. We defended innocent people, stopped pirates, prevented crimes, but we did it with a level of violence that frightens other species. Morrison studied the reports. The incident with the mining ship was there, along with several others. There was the time human cargo haulers accidentally found a slave trafficking operation and freed 300 captives. The diplomatic incident where human tourists witnessed a public execution and physically stopped it, causing an interstellar scandal. They're afraid of us, Morrison said quietly. Not because we're evil, but because we don't back down from fights. Exactly, Grant confirmed. And now we have a new situation. She switched the display to show Lisa Bennett's discovery. One of our archaeological teams found evidence of an ancient threat, something called the Endless. The Council has known about this legend for centuries, but always dismissed it as mythology. Let me guess, Captain Victoria said. Now they want the scary humans to investigate. Close, they want to form a joint expedition. Council scientists and military observers, human archaeological expertise, and human combat capabilities just in case. In case the ancient monster story turns out to be real, Morrison finished, the Council is split. Half want to work with us on this threat. The other half want to use this as justification to limit human expansion, arguing we're too aggressive to be trusted. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. This is a test, Morrison realized. They want to see how we handle a crisis. If we're too aggressive, they'll use it against us. If we're not aggressive enough and something goes wrong, they'll blame us anyway. Grant nodded. Which is why I need the best people on this. Professor Bennett will lead the research team. Commander Morrison, you'll command the military escort. I'm a fighter pilot, not a babysitter for scientists. You're also calm under pressure and you think before shooting, which is more than I can say for some of our officers. Grant's expression softened. The galaxy is watching us, Jake. We need to prove we can be trusted. That we're not the violent savages some species think we are. Morrison sighed. When do I meet the professor? The door opened and Lisa Bennett entered, still wearing her dusty work clothes. She looked tired but determined. Grant made quick introductions. Professor Bennett, Commander Morrison. You'll be working closely on this expedition. The professor leads the research, the commander handles security. Lisa extended her hand and Morrison shook it. Try not to shoot any priceless artifacts. Commander, try not to wake up any ancient monsters, Professor. They both smiled, but there was tension beneath the humor. The Council is providing 3 ships as escort, Grant continued. A Valorian cruiser, a Palaxian scout, and a Quellan science vessel. They'll be under your command, Commander. They're going to love taking orders from a human, Morrison said sarcastically. That's their problem, not yours. I've also authorized upgrades for the Defiant. Grant's expression turned serious. Listen carefully. This expedition is more than archaeology. It's humanity's chance to prove we value knowledge and cooperation, not just combat. No pressure, Lisa muttered. Oh, there's plenty of pressure, Grant assured her. Because if your translations are correct, we might be facing something that makes our current problems look insignificant. She switched the display to show a star map with highlighted locations. The progenitor text mentions 12 seal sites scattered across the galaxy, places where the Endless were imprisoned. We've identified 3 others from Council archives. And if the seals are breaking, Morrison asked, then we'll need every advantage we can get, including the one species in the galaxy that evolved on a death world and thinks fighting is normal. Lisa studied the star map. There's something else. The text mentions that the progenitors didn't fight alone. They had allies. Other species that helped them. What happened to those species? Captain Victoria asked. Lisa's expression darkened. They all went extinct. Every single one. The room fell silent again. So we're investigating an ancient threat that destroyed multiple civilizations, while being judged by the galactic community on whether we're too dangerous to exist freely, Morrison summarized. Sounds like a normal Tuesday. Despite the tension, several people laughed. The expedition assembles in 3 days, Grant said. Commander, select your team carefully. Professor, coordinate with the Council scientists. And both of you remember that the galaxy is watching. After the meeting ended, Morrison caught Lisa's arm. Professor, be honest with me. How dangerous is this, really? Lisa met his eyes. The progenitors were the most advanced civilization in recorded history. They built structures that still work 50,000 years later. They had technology we can't understand, she paused. And they were terrified of the Endless, so scared that they fought for 10,000 years. Then hid all evidence and prayed it would never be found again. But we found it anyway. Because we're humans. And we dig where we shouldn't. Lisa smiled grimly. The progenitors left one more warning. They said if the seals ever weakened, the only hope would be a species that understood survival at any cost. A species that refused to give up? They were talking about species like us. Maybe. Or maybe they were warning about the endless. Lisa shook her head. Either way, we're about to find out. Are we the survivors who never quit? Or the monsters who can't be stopped? Morrison watched her leave, then turned to Captain Victoria. Tell me this isn't going to end badly. Victoria patted his shoulder. It's definitely going to end badly. The question is whether we survive it. 3 days later, the expedition fleet assembled at the designated meeting point. The Valorian cruiser Radiant Dawn was beautiful, all flowing curves and crystal structures. Its captain, Zarthon, had made his feelings clear in the first briefing. My government insists I participate, Zarthon said, his translated voice full of contempt. But do not mistake my presence for approval of human methods. Morrison simply nodded politely, which seemed to annoy the Valorian even more. The Palaxian scout Whisperwind was crewed by bird-like beings. Its captain, Silnara, was more diplomatic but clearly nervous about working with humans. The Quellan science vessel Infinite Curiosity had the most enthusiastic crew. The squid-like scientists had already sent 1,700 questions about human biology and culture to the expedition database. Lisa stood on the Defiance Bridge watching the alien ships. This is either going to be the most productive collaboration in history or a complete disaster. Why not both? Suggested Lieutenant Clark. I like your optimism. Lisa turned to Morrison. The council scientists want a joint briefing before we head to the first SEAL site. They're requesting we meet on the Infinite Curiosity. Morrison looked suspicious. All of us in one place? That's a security risk. It's also diplomatic necessity. What are they going to do? Attack us during a peaceful science mission? You'd be surprised what people do when they're scared. The briefing on the Quellan ship went as well as could be expected. The room was filled with water since Quellans needed it to survive. But they had set up a sealed observation area for species that breathed air. Representatives from multiple species gathered to hear about the mission. Professor Krisha, the bird-like Palaxian diplomat, led the briefing. We're investigating Professor Bennett's discovery about the progenitors and the endless. The display showed the star map with 12 marked locations. We've confirmed 4 as actual structures. The others are theoretical based on data and legends, Lisa stood to explain. The progenitor technology is beyond our understanding. The structures are massive, made from materials we can't identify. They generate energy fields that extend into other dimensions. We think they're not just physical barriers, but dimensional locks. Dimensional locks? Zarthon said skeptically. Impossible. The progenitors did many impossible things, Lisa countered. They could manipulate space and time, create stable wormholes, and apparently bind entities from other dimensions. The briefing continued with discussions of the SEAL sites, safety protocols, and scientific methods. By the end, most alien scientists seemed cautiously optimistic. But Morrison noticed Zarthon talking quietly with other Valorians. Their body language suggested conspiracy. Problem? Lisa asked quietly as they returned to their shuttle. Maybe. Some council species still don't trust us. If things go wrong, they might try to blame humanity. Can't we just focus on science and not politics? Morrison smiled. Professor, everything is politics, especially when the fate of the galaxy might be at stake. Back on the Defiant, Morrison gathered his senior staff. I need everyone ready for anything. We're walking a political tightrope while investigating an existential threat. Define anything, said Lieutenant Clark. Best case, we do some science, prove the SEALs are fine, and go home. Worst case, we wake up an ancient horror and have to stop it. The fleet set course for the Kepler 442 system. The journey would take 3 days, giving everyone time to prepare. Lisa spent her time reviewing texts and working with council scientists. Despite political tensions, she found most of her alien colleagues genuinely passionate about the work. The Quellans were particularly helpful, their curiosity infectious. On the 3rd day, they arrived at Kepler 442b. The planet hung in space, rust-colored with minimal atmosphere. All ships, this is Commander Morrison. Science teams prepare for deployment. The Defiant descended through the thin atmosphere. Lisa watched through the windows as the ruins came into view. There, she pointed. That's the primary SEAL structure. It rose from the ground like a massive dark obelisk easily 100 meters tall. The structure seemed to absorb light, making it look like a hole in reality. "That's not in my reports," Lisa said, alarmed. "The structure is active. It shouldn't be active." "Define active," Morrison said sharply. "The energy field should be dormant. But look at the readings. It's generating massive amounts of energy. Is it failing? I don't know. It could be reacting to us, or it could be under stress, or..." The obelisk pulsed with dark light, and every instrument screamed warnings. "Commander!" Lieutenant Clark shouted. "Massive energy spike detected. Something's coming through the seal. All ships, battle stations, science teams, evacuate now." But it was too late. The seal shattered with a sound like reality breaking, and something emerged. Something vast and hungry and impossibly old. The Endless had returned, and humanity's greatest test was beginning. The thing that came through the broken seal was impossible to describe properly. It existed in multiple dimensions at once, appearing different depending on who looked at it. To the crystal-like Valorians, it looked like a swarm of dark crystals. To the bird-like Palaxians, it appeared as living darkness. To the squid-like Quellans, it seemed like an ocean turned evil. To the humans, it simply looked like death itself. "Evasive action," Morrison shouted as the entity reached toward the Defiant with appendages that shouldn't exist in normal space. The ship rolled hard, its systems screaming in protest. Lieutenant Clark's fingers moved quickly across her controls. "It's massive, Commander. The sensors can't even measure it properly. It's at least 2 kilometers across, maybe much larger. All ships open fire. Aim for the center." The Radiant Dawn fired first, sending beams of concentrated light at the entity. The beam struck and seemed to be absorbed without any effect. The Whisperwind's weapons had the same result. Even the Defiant's more powerful human weapons, missiles, and railguns did nothing. They either passed through the entity or disappeared. "It's not working." Captain Zarthon's voice came through the communication system, for once without his usual contempt. "The entity is immune to normal weapons." Lisa was thrown against her safety harness as the ship dodged another appendage. "Commander, we need to stop shooting and start thinking." The progenitor text said the Endless couldn't be destroyed, only contained. Then how do we contain it? Morrison demanded while ordering another volley of missiles. "The seals. We need to understand how they worked." Lisa was already pulling up her research files, her hands shaking. "The progenitors used dimensional locks powered by quantum energy. They didn't fight the Endless in normal space, they pushed them into another dimension and sealed the doors." "Can we do that?" "Not in the next 5 minutes." The entity turned its attention to the Infinite Curiosity, reaching toward the Quellan science vessel. Morrison watched in horror as the ship's shields failed, and the entity's appendage touched the hull. What happened next was instant and terrible. The ship didn't explode or break apart. Instead, it began to dissolve. Its matter broke down into tiny particles that were drawn into the entity like water going down a drain. The screams on the communication channel lasted only seconds before cutting off. 300 Quellan scientists gone in an instant. "Pull back," Morrison ordered. "All ships, maximum retreat. Get out of range." But the entity was faster. It flowed through space like liquid shadow, chasing the fleeing vessels. Another appendage reached for the Whisperwind. "No," Captain Silnara's voice cried out. And then the Palaxian ship began the same horrible dissolution. "Commander, we can't outrun it," Lieutenant Clark reported, her voice tight with fear. "It's matching our speed and getting faster." Morrison's mind raced. Every instinct told him to fight, to do something, but their weapons were useless and their shields wouldn't last long. They needed a miracle or a plan or both. "The other seals," Lisa said suddenly. "Commander, the text said the seals were connected. If we can reach another seal site, we might be able to use its energy field to repel this thing." "How far to the nearest site?" Lisa checked her maps. "The closest confirmed seal is in the Proxima system. 6 hours at maximum speed. We won't last 6 hours with that thing chasing us," Danny Cooper shouted from his station. Morrison made a decision. "All ships prepare for immediate jump to Proxima. We'll try to outrun it." "Commander, jumping from inside a gravity well is incredibly dangerous," Lieutenant Clark warned. "So is being dissolved by an ancient cosmic horror." "Jump on my mark," the Radiant Dawn responded immediately. The ship vanished in a flash of light, entering faster than light travel. The entity seemed to notice the escape attempt. It surged forward, splitting into multiple appendages, reaching for both remaining ships at once. "Jump now," Morrison commanded. The Defiant's drive engaged, and reality twisted sickeningly. For a moment, Morrison felt the entity's touch on the hull, a sensation of wrongness and hunger that made his skin crawl. Then they were through, racing away faster than light with alarms blaring throughout the ship. "Status report," Morrison demanded. "Hull integrity at 87%, Clark reported. "That thing took a bite out of our rear shielding. Engineering is reporting casualties. Get medical teams down there." "What about the Radiant Dawn?" "They made it through. Sending their status now." The Valorian ship had escaped cleanly, though their shields were nearly gone. Morrison contacted Captain Zarthon. The Valorian's crystalline features showed cracks of stress. "Commander Morrison, this is catastrophic. We've lost 2 ships and 600 crew members. We must return to Council space and request reinforcements." "By the time reinforcements arrive, that thing could have consumed a dozen more worlds," Morrison countered. "We need to get to Proxima and find a way to stop it." "Stop it? Our weapons are useless." "Then we find different weapons. The progenitors sealed these things away. That means it can be done." "The progenitors sacrificed billions to do that," Zarthon shot back. "Are you suggesting we do the same?" "I'm suggesting we try to save those billions before they need to be sacrificed." Morrison kept his voice hard. "Captain, I need you focused. We're the only ones who know what's coming. If we don't find a solution, nobody will." Zarthon was silent for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. "What do you need from the Radiant Dawn?" "Full sensor analysis of the entity. Share everything with Professor Bennett. She's our best chance at understanding this thing." "Agreed. We'll reach Proxima in 5 hours. What do we do when we get there?" "Hopefully not die." Morrison closed the channel and found Lisa already deep in analysis, surrounded by holographic screens as she compared progenitor texts with sensor data. "Talk to me, Professor." "What did we learn?" "It's worse than I thought," Lisa said without looking up. "The entity we encountered isn't the Endless. It's one of the Endless. A single entity. The text mentioned swarms, armies, thousands of them." Morrison felt his stomach drop. One did that damage. What could thousands do? End galactic civilization in weeks. Maybe days. Lisa pulled up a simulation. Based on the consumption rate we observed, a single entity could dissolve a populated planet in about 48 hours. A swarm could sterilize entire sectors. How many seals are there? 12 total. 1 is already broken, which means 11 more entities could escape. Or already have escaped. Lisa nodded grimly. "I've been checking Council archives. There have been 7 unexplained colony disappearances in the past year. Entire settlements going silent with no distress calls, no signs of attack. What if those weren't disappearances? What if they were consumed? You think the seals have been failing gradually and we didn't notice? It's possible. The frontier is vast. Colonies go dark for many reasons. Pirates, disease, equipment failure. Nobody would think to blame ancient sealed entities." Morrison pulled up a display of Council space. "If you're right, we need to warn everyone. Every colony, every station, every ship, and tell them what? That cosmic horrors from 50,000 years ago are eating people?" Lisa shook her head. "The Council will panic. Species will turn on each other. We'll have civil war before the Endless even reach core worlds. So what do? We learn everything we can at Proxima. We figure out how the seals work, why they failed, and whether we can repair them." Lisa met his eyes. "And if we can't repair them, we find another way to stop these things." The progenitors couldn't stop them. The progenitors were limited by their ethics and technology. Humans are more flexible. You mean more desperate and willing to try crazy things, that too. The 5-hour journey to Proxima felt endless. Morrison's crew worked frantically to repair damage while Lisa coordinated with surviving Council scientists. The loss of the Infinite Curiosity had been devastating, not just for casualties but for the knowledge those scientists possessed. Lieutenant Danny Cooper approached Morrison on the bridge, looking troubled. "Commander, I've been monitoring Council communications. There's panic spreading. Someone leaked information about the attack. Who? Unknown. But there are calls for humanity to be expelled from the Council. Some are accusing us of releasing the Endless deliberately. Others are demanding military action. Against us or the threat? Both, sir. It's getting ugly fast," Morrison cursed under his breath. "They were racing to save the galaxy while being blamed for endangering it. Keep monitoring. If the Council is going to do something stupid, I want warning." The Proxima system appeared ahead, a red dwarf star with 4 rocky planets. The seal site was on the 3rd planet, A frozen world with barely any atmosphere. Sensors are detecting the seal structure, Clark reported. It's similar to the one at Kepler but much larger. And Commander, it's already active. Energy readings are extremely high. Is it failing? Unknown. But there's something else. We're detecting debris, ships, stations all destroyed. This system was supposed to be uninhabited, but someone was here recently. Morrison felt dread settle in his stomach. Show me. The view screen displayed a graveyard of vessels scattered across space. Some were council designs, others were civilian transports. All showed the same horrible decay pattern they'd seen on the Infinite Curiosity. It already came here, Lisa whispered. Another entity was released from this seal and attacked whoever came to investigate. Where is it now? Unknown. The debris suggests the attack happened days ago. It could be anywhere in the sector. They approached the planet carefully. The seal structure dominated the frozen landscape, a massive complex of obelisks that stretched for kilometers. This is much more elaborate than the Kepler site, Lisa observed. This must have been a major progenitor facility. They landed near the central obelisk. Morrison assembled a landing party. Himself, Lisa, Danny Cooper, 4 Marines, and representatives from the Radiant Dawn, including Captain Zarthon. The Valorian captain's presence surprised Morrison. I didn't expect you to join us personally. After witnessing the fate of the Infinite Curiosity, I decided that facing danger directly was better than waiting safely. Zarthon's features shifted in what might have been respect. Besides, you humans have a saying, lead from the front. We also have one about discretion being the better part of valor. I prefer the first saying. They approached the structure in environmental suits. Up close, the obelisk was even more imposing, its dark surface seeming to absorb all light. Lisa ran her scanners over the surface. The material exists partially in another dimension. That's how it interfaces with the dimensional locks. Can you access the interior? Morrison asked. There should be an entrance. The progenitors built these to be maintained. Lisa studied the carvings. Here, this symbol marks access points. She placed her hand on the symbol and the obelisk responded. A section of wall dissolved, revealing a passage leading down into darkness. Well, Morrison said, that's not ominous at all. It's also our only lead, Lisa countered. We need to understand how these seals work. They descended into the obelisk in standard formation. The interior was vast, with corridors that seemed to extend impossibly far. The interior is bigger than the outside, Lisa explained. The progenitors could manipulate space itself. They walked for what felt like hours, descending deeper. The walls were covered in carvings, and Lisa stopped frequently to record them. It's a history, she said in wonder. The entire structure documents the war. What does it say? Zarthon asked. Lisa's voice was hollow as she translated. It says the Endless weren't always hostile. They came from outside our universe, refugees from a dying reality. The progenitors tried to help them, but the Endless needed more than sanctuary. They needed sustenance, and the only thing that could sustain them was biological life energy. They ate civilizations to survive, Morrison said. Not ate converted, they absorbed biological matter and turned it into themselves. Each world they consumed made them stronger. Lisa pointed to more carvings. The progenitors realized too late that by helping the Endless enter our universe, they'd doomed it. The refugees couldn't be stopped. They needed to consume, and they would never stop. So the progenitors sealed them away, Zarthon said. But why not simply destroy them? Because they couldn't. Lisa's hand trembled. The Endless can't be destroyed. They exist across multiple dimensions, multiple realities. You can hurt them, slow them, contain them, but you can't kill them. The seals were the only solution. Dimensional prisons powered by billions of progenitors who volunteered to become living batteries. The group stood in silence. And now the seals are failing, Morrison said quietly. Which means they died for nothing. Not nothing. They bought us 50,000 years. Lisa looked up. The question is whether we can repair the seals before time runs out. They continued deeper until they reached a vast chamber. In the center stood a crystalline matrix pulsing with energy. Surrounding it were thousands of pods, each containing what had once been a progenitor, now reduced to dried husks. These are the batteries, Lisa whispered in horror. The progenitors who powered the seal. And they're all dead. Then what's powering it now? Morrison asked. The chamber blazed with light. The matrix flared and holographic figures appeared, progenitors tall and graceful, their forms suggesting pure energy barely contained. One spoke and Morrison's translator rendered it into English. If you see this message, the seals are failing. We knew this day would come. Nothing lasts forever, but we didn't leave you defenseless. Within this structure are complete specifications for the seals and knowledge of how to create them. You must choose. Continue our work and sacrifice yourselves to maintain the prison or find another way. We cannot choose for you. We can only offer you the tools we wished we had. Whatever you decide, know that we do not judge. We are the dead. The galaxy belongs to the living now. Make of it what you will. The hologram faded. Lisa accessed the matrix, downloading information. They left us everything. Complete specifications, power requirements, everything needed to rebuild the seals. At the cost of billions of lives, Zarthon said, the same price they paid. Maybe we can find another way, Lisa said. Humanity tends to reject impossible choices. Professor, sometimes the impossible choice is the only choice, Morrison said gently. And sometimes we make a new choice nobody thought possible. Lisa looked determined. If there's another way to stop the endless, we'll find it. They returned to the surface in silence. When they emerged, Lieutenant Clark's voice crackled over the communication system. Commander, we have a problem. Long-range sensors are detecting massive energy surges at 3 more seal sites. More entities are breaking through. How many? At least 3. Possibly more. And Commander, one is heading toward inhabited space, directly toward Arcturus colony. Morrison felt ice in his veins. Arcturus was home to 5 million beings. How long until it arrives? Less than 12 hours. We're 2 days away, even at maximum speed. I know, sir. Morrison looked at Lisa, then at Zarthon. We need to warn them, and we need to figure out how to stop that thing. With what? Zarthon demanded. Our weapons are useless. Then we find better weapons. Or we get creative, or we do what humans do best. Morrison's jaw set with determination. We refuse to accept that this is impossible. Time was running out, and the endless were hungry. The journey to Arcturus colony was a nightmare of desperate preparation. Morrison had Clark push the Defiance drive beyond safe limits, cutting hours off their travel time but risking engine failure. The Radiant Dawn matched their dangerous pace, with Captain Zarthon apparently deciding that survival was more important than caution. Lisa spent the journey in her makeshift laboratory, surrounded by holographic displays of progenitor technology. She had been working without sleep since they left Proxima, surviving on coffee and determination. Professor, you need to rest, Morrison said, finding her still awake at 3 a.m. ship time. Can't rest. Not enough time. Lisa gestured at her displays. I think I found something. The progenitor's seals use dimensional locks, right? They pushed the endless into another dimension and sealed the doors. Right. But what if we don't seal them? What if we trap them? Morrison rubbed his tired eyes. I don't understand. The endless exist across multiple dimensions. That's why normal weapons don't work. You can't shoot something that's only partially in our reality. Lisa pulled up a diagram. But the progenitor's technology could create stable dimensional pockets. Small universes with one-way entrances. A trap. A cage. We lure an entity into the pocket, seal the entrance, and it's trapped in a tiny universe with no way out. And the power requirements? Lisa's expression fell. That's the problem. The progenitors used billions of lives to power their seals. I've been calculating, and even a temporary dimensional pocket would require massive amounts of energy. More than our ships can generate. What about the seal structures themselves? They still have power, not enough, and we can't reach them in time. Lisa slumped in her chair. I'm sorry, Commander. I thought I found an answer, but the math doesn't work. Morrison studied the diagrams, his mind racing. There had to be a way. Humans didn't give up. That was what made them terrifying to other species. That was what made them human. Professor, what if we don't need to power it for long? What if we just need enough energy for a few seconds? I don't understand. The progenitors built their seals to last forever. But we don't need forever. We just need long enough to contain the entity while we figure out something permanent. Morrison's mind was racing. What if we use our ship's power cores? All of them. The Defiant, the Radiant Dawn, everything we have. That would destroy the ships. You'd be stranding everyone. Better stranded than dissolved. Can it work? Lisa ran quick calculations. Maybe. If we synchronize all power cores and direct the energy through a focusing array, yes. It could work for maybe 30 seconds, long enough to open a dimensional pocket and lure the entity inside. How do we lure it? Lisa smiled grimly. The Endless are attracted to biological life energy. They can sense it. If we put a large concentration of life in the pocket, they'll go for it. You mean bait. Living bait, I mean volunteers. People willing to risk themselves to trap the entity. Morrison thought about it. That's insane. You asked for creative solutions. I'm being creative. I like it. Coordinate with the engineers. I'll talk to Captain Zarthon. The Valorian captain's response was predictable. You want to destroy our ships and use us as bait for cosmic horrors? Zarthon's crystalline features somehow showed disbelief. That is the human solution? Do you have a better one? Silence, I thought not. Look, I know it's crazy, but crazy is what we have. If that entity reaches Arcturus, 5 million people die. If we do nothing, more entities will break free and billions will die. And if your plan fails, then we die trying, which is better than letting those 5 million people die without a fight. Zarthon was quiet for a long moment. When the Council first met humanity, we thought you were simply aggressive and reckless. Now I understand. You are aggressive and reckless, but for others. You take risks that any sane species would reject, not for conquest or glory, but because someone needs help and you cannot accept inaction. Is that a yes? It is an observation. And yes, the Radiant Dawn will participate in your insane plan. If we die protecting others. That is not a bad way to end. We're not going to die. Probably. Your optimism is either inspiring or delusional. I haven't decided which. They arrived at Arcturus colony with 3 hours to spare. The colony was beautiful. A cluster of habitats and stations orbiting a blue-white star, home to millions of beings who had no idea what was coming. Morrison immediately contacted the colonial administrator, a Quellan named Rippleflow. Administrator, we need to begin immediate evacuation. A hostile entity is approaching your system. Commander Morrison, we have no record of any military threat in this sector. What kind of entity? The kind that dissolves entire ships in seconds and cannot be stopped by normal weapons. Trust me, begin evacuation now. To Rippleflow's credit, he didn't argue. Within minutes, evacuation alarms sounded across the colony. Ships began launching, heading for emergency meeting points. But evacuation took time, and time was the one thing they didn't have. Entity detected at System Edge, Lieutenant Clark reported. Arrival at colony in 40 minutes. Morrison pulled up displays. Position our ships between the entity and the colony. We'll buy them as much time as we can, sir. The evacuation ships need at least 2 hours to clear the system. Then we hold for 2 hours. That's impossible. So was surviving at Kepler, but here we are. Lieutenant Cooper, start preparing the dimensional trap. Coordinate with the Radiant Dawn. I want everything ready in 30 minutes. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, though Morrison could see fear on their faces. They all knew what they were facing. Lisa joined him on the bridge, looking exhausted but determined. The focusing array is ready. We've rigged both ships' power cores to discharge simultaneously. It'll create a dimensional pocket for about 30 seconds, maybe 40 if we're lucky. And the bait? I volunteer. Absolutely not. Commander, I'm the one who understands the progenitor technology. If something goes wrong, I'm the only one who can fix it. Professor, this is not a debate. Lisa's voice was firm. 5 million people are counting on us. I'm not letting them down because I was afraid. Morrison wanted to argue, but he recognized the look on her face. It was the look of someone who had decided that some things were worth dying for. Fine, but you take an armed escort. And if anything goes wrong, you bail out immediately. Agreed. The entity appeared on sensors, and even on the view screen it was terrifying. A vast shape that hurt to look at directly, existing partially in multiple dimensions, reaching toward the colony. All ships, engage, Morrison commanded. The Defiant and Radiant Dawn opened fire, their weapons having no effect. The entity didn't even slow down. Keep firing. We need its attention. Morrison watched the display. Evacuation ships were streaming away from the colony, thousands of vessels fleeing. But there were still millions of people on the stations, unable to evacuate in time. It's ignoring us, Zarthon reported. It senses the colony. The concentration of life there is too attractive. Then we give it something more attractive. Professor, launch the bait now. Lisa was already in the shuttle, along with 20 volunteers from both ships. Human and Valorian crew members who had decided that if someone had to risk themselves, it should be them. The shuttle launched toward the entity. broadcasting biological signatures at maximum strength. For a terrifying moment, Morrison thought it wouldn't work. Then the entity shifted, its attention turning toward the small shuttle. "It's working," Clark reported. "The entity is changing course." "Professor, fall back now." But Lisa's voice came back steady. "Not yet. We need to lead it away from the colony. Give the evacuation more time." The shuttle raced ahead of the entity, leading it on a deadly chase. The entity followed, its appendages reaching, always just meters behind. "Professor, you've bought them enough time." "Get out of there." "Just a little further. We need to clear the colony's orbital space." Morrison watched helplessly as the shuttle dodged and weaved. One wrong move and Lisa and her volunteers would suffer the same fate as the Infinite Curiosity. "Approaching trap coordinates," Lisa reported. 30 seconds. "Standing by to activate the dimensional pocket," Lieutenant Cooper confirmed. "All power cores synchronized." "Ready on your mark, Commander." Morrison's hand hovered over the activation control. One wrong move and they'd lose the shuttle. But if they waited too long, the entity might turn back. "Professor, count down for me." 15 seconds, 10-5 now. Morrison activated the control. Both ships' power cores discharged simultaneously, directing impossible amounts of energy through the focusing array. Space ripped open in front of the shuttle, a tear in reality leading to the dimensional pocket. The shuttle dove through. The entity followed, unable to resist the life energy. "Close it!" Morrison shouted. But something was wrong. The dimensional pocket was unstable, the tear growing wider instead of closing. "The entity's mass is too great." Lisa's voice crackled. "The pocket is collapsing." "Commander, you need to add more power or it'll tear reality apart." "We've already given everything." "Then give more. Overload the cores if you have to." Morrison looked at Clark, who was shaking her head. "Sir, if we overload the cores, the ships will explode. And if we don't, that thing comes through and kills everyone." Morrison opened a channel to the entire crew. "All hands, this is the commander. Abandon ship immediately. You have 2 minutes. Sir, you need to evacuate too. Someone needs to stay and trigger the overload. Get everyone else clear." "That's an order." Morrison didn't wait. He was already preparing to overload the power cores. On the view screen, he could see the Radiant Dawn's crew launching in escape pods. "Morrison, what are you doing?" Zarthon's voice came through. "Staying to trigger the overload. Someone has to. Then I will stay as well. If humanity's commander goes down with his ship, then so will the Valorian captain. That's not necessary. It is to me. I have spent my life serving with pride. Let me end it the same way." Morrison felt a lump in his throat. "It's been an honor, Captain." "The honor has been mine, Commander. Though I still think your species is insane. We prefer the term aggressively optimistic." Both captains laughed, a moment of friendship in the face of death. "All escape pods away," Clark reported. "Sir, please, get clear, Lieutenant." "Take care of the crew." Morrison closed the channel and watched the countdown, 10 seconds until overload. The dimensional pocket was still unstable, but maybe they could trap it long enough. 5 seconds. On the view screen, he saw the shuttle emerge from the pocket, Lisa and her volunteers escaping. 3 seconds. The pocket began to collapse, reality folding in on itself. 1 second. Morrison hit the final command and both ships' power cores overloaded. The explosion was visible from half a system away. Twin stars blazed as the Defiant and Radiant Dawn vaporized, their energy feeding into the dimensional pocket. The Terran space collapsed, sealing the entity inside an infinite prison. For a moment, the colony held its breath. Then sensors confirmed it. The entity was gone, trapped. The colony erupted in celebrations as evacuation ships began returning. 5 million lives had been saved. But on the emergency command ship that Lieutenant Clark had fled to, there were no celebrations. Only grief. "Commander Morrison gave his life to save us all," Clark said quietly to the crew, as did Captain Zarthon. "They proved that courage and sacrifice aren't limited to one species. They're the qualities of anyone who chooses to stand between innocent people and harm." She was preparing more words when a communication came through. The sender ID made her breath catch. "This is Commander Morrison to anyone receiving. If you're hearing this, the overload worked and I'm very dead. Sorry about that." Clark's hands trembled as she opened the full message. It was pre-recorded video, Morrison's face filling the screen. "I knew there was a chance we wouldn't make it, so I wanted to leave final instructions. First Lieutenant Clark, you're in command now. Take care of the crew. they're good people. Second, make sure Professor Bennett gets full credit for the dimensional trap. Without her genius, we'd all be entity food. Third, tell the Council that humanity isn't going anywhere. We're loud, aggressive, and we don't quit. If that scares them, they'll have to learn to live with it. Morrison's expression softened. To my crew, thank you for following me even when my orders were insane. To Captain Zarthon, it was an honor to serve with you at the end. And to anyone from the Council watching this, remember what you saw here. Humanity and the Valorian Empire. Two species that didn't always get along, sacrificing everything to save millions they'd never met. That's what we can be together. That's what we should be. The message ended with Morrison's final words. Oh, and tell Lieutenant Cooper he still owes me 20 credits from poker night. I expect that debt paid to Clark. Despite her tears, Clark smiled. The dimensional trap had worked, but the entity was contained, not destroyed. Lisa calculated that the pocket would hold for about 50 years before needing reinforcement. 50 years isn't forever, Director Helen Grant observed during a debriefing. But it's long enough to study the progenitor technology and find a permanent solution. Or to find the other entities and trap them too, Lisa added. She looked different now, harder. We confirmed that 11 more seals are failing. 11 more entities to trap or contain. Can we do it? I don't know. But we have to try. The galaxy had changed. Humanity had proven itself not through conquest or dominance, but through sacrifice and courage. And the other species were watching, learning, and finally beginning to understand what it meant to be human. 6 months after the Arcturus incident, Director Helen Grant stood before the Galactic Council once again. But this time the atmosphere was completely different. The fear and suspicion that had once filled the chamber had been replaced by something else. Respect. Behind Grant, holographic displays showed the results of 6 months of intense work. 7 entities contained. 4 more SEAL sites reinforced and stabilized. 0 civilian casualties in the last 4 months. The Endless Containment Task Force has exceeded all expectations, Grant reported. Under joint leadership, we have accomplished what seemed impossible half a year ago. Ambassador Zixthar, who had once called for restrictions on humanity, now spoke in their support. The task force has proven that cooperation between species is not only possible, but necessary. What began as a test of humanity has become a model for how we should all work together. Krisha, the Palaxian diplomat, ruffled her feathers in agreement. 6 months ago, many of us feared humanity. We saw only their aggression, their death world origins, their refusal to accept defeat. Now we understand. Those same qualities that frightened us are exactly what we needed to survive this threat. The question before us today, Zixthar continued, is whether to make the Endless Containment Task Force a permanent institution, whether to commit resources indefinitely to a threat that may persist for generations. Grant pulled up new data from the progenitor archives. The records suggest that the endless cycle repeats approximately every 50,000 years. They break free, consume civilizations, and must be sealed away again. If that pattern holds, we need permanent infrastructure to monitor and maintain the seals. A 50,000-year commitment, murmured one of the council members. Generations of our descendants dedicated to containing these entities. Yes, Grant said simply. The progenitors made that commitment. Now it's our turn. The vote was unanimous. The Endless Containment Task Force would become a permanent council institution, with representatives from all species and commanded jointly by military and scientific leadership. Professor Lisa Bennett, now Director Bennett, was named permanent scientific director. The military command went to a rotating council of species representatives, ensuring no single species had too much power. The Defiant's name lived on. A new vessel, the USS Morrison, became the flagship of an entire fleet. Human, Valorian, Quellan, Palaxian, and dozens of other ship designs, all working together. But perhaps the most significant change came in how the galaxy viewed humanity itself. Captain Victoria Hayes, now an admiral, summed it up during a ceremony honoring those who died at Arcturus. 6 months ago, the galaxy asked whether humans could be trusted, whether our aggression, our death-world nature, our stubborn refusal to quit made us dangerous. The answer is yes, we are dangerous. But we're dangerous to the things that threaten innocent lives. We're dangerous to those who prey on the weak. We're dangerous to ancient cosmic horrors that think they can consume civilizations without consequence. She gestured to the memorial wall, where Commander Morrison's name was inscribed, alongside Captain Zarthon's, and hundreds of others who had died fighting the Endless. These people proved that humanity's aggression isn't mindless violence. It's protective fury. Our Deathworld origins didn't make us cruel. They made us survivors who understand the value of life. Our refusal to quit isn't stubbornness. It's hope that refuses to die even in the face of impossible odds. The assembled crowd, human and alien alike, stood in respectful silence. So yes, we're dangerous, Victoria concluded. But we're dangerous for you, not to you. And anyone who threatens the innocent will learn exactly how dangerous humans can be when protecting something they care about. The ceremony ended with the launch of a new memorial, satellite carrying the names of all who had fallen. It would orbit Earth forever, a reminder of the price of safety and the courage of those who paid it. On the bridge of the USS Morrison, Director Lisa Bennett watched the satellite launch. Beside her stood Captain Kixelar, a Valorian who had served under Captain Zarthon, and representatives from a dozen other species, all working together to monitor the remaining SEAL sites. "Do you think we'll win?" asked Splish Splash, now the Morrison's chief science officer. "In the long run, can we really contain the Endless forever?" Lisa thought about Commander Morrison's final message, about his insistence that humanity wasn't changing who they were, about his absolute refusal to accept defeat. "I think we'll do what humans always do," she said finally. "We'll fight. We'll adapt. We'll find solutions that shouldn't exist and make them work anyway, and we'll never ever give up. Even if it takes 50,000 years? Even if it takes 50,000 years." Kixelar's crystalline features shifted in what Lisa had learned to recognize as a Valorian smile. "Then perhaps there is hope after all. Though I suspect future generations will curse us for leaving them such a difficult job." "Future generations always curse their ancestors," Lisa said with a laugh. "It's tradition." The Morrison jumped to faster-than-light speed, heading toward the next assignment. Behind them, the memorial satellite caught Earth's sunlight, shining like a small star against the darkness of space. 3 years after the Arcturus incident, the changes in galactic society were impossible to ignore. Human and alien crews served together on ships throughout Council space. Joint training programs had been established. Cultural exchanges were common. The fear that had once dominated interactions between humanity and other species had been replaced by genuine friendship and mutual respect. The Endless Containment Task Force had become the most prestigious assignment in Council military and scientific circles. Young beings from dozens of species competed for positions on the task force ships, hoping to serve alongside the legendary humans and their allies. Lieutenant Amy Clark, now Captain Clark of her own vessel, the Courage, reflected on the changes during a routine patrol. Her crew was a mix of humans, Valorians, Quellans, and Palaxians, all working together seamlessly. "Captain, we're approaching SEAL Site 7, reported her navigation officer, a young Palaxian named Tirsha. "Readings show stable energy levels. No signs of degradation. Good, run full diagnostics anyway. I want to be sure." As her crew worked, Clark thought about Commander Morrison and how proud he would be. The sacrifice he and Captain Zarthon had made hadn't just saved 5 million lives. It had changed the entire galaxy's perception of what was possible when different species worked together. On the Council homeworld, Director Helen Grant was preparing to retire. She had served as Earth's chief diplomat for 5 years since the Endless Crisis began, and she was tired. But she was also satisfied. Humanity had found its place in the galactic community not through force or intimidation, but through demonstrated courage and unwavering commitment to protecting others. Her replacement, Marcus Webb, sat across from her reviewing briefing files. "It's a different galaxy than the one we joined," Webb observed. 3 years ago, half the Council wanted us expelled. Now they're trying to recruit more humans for every major project. "That's because we proved ourselves," Grant replied. "Not by being the strongest or the smartest, but by being willing to sacrifice for others. That's what the galaxy needed to see. Do you think the endless threat will ever truly end?" Grant looked out the window at the stars. "No, I think it's a permanent part of our reality now. Every 50,000 years, the seals will weaken. Every generation will face the same choice the progenitors faced. Fight or surrender, sacrifice or survive, and that's a heavy burden." "It is, but I believe we're up to it. Not just humans, all of us together." Aboard the USS Morrison, Director Lisa Bennett was conducting a tour for a group of young scientists from various species who had been selected for the task force training program. They stood in the ship's museum section, looking at displays about the first encounter with the Endless. The most important lesson from Commander Morrison and Captain Zarthon, Lisa told them, is that species differences don't matter when facing a common threat. Human, Valorian, Quellan, Palaxian, we're all citizens of this galaxy. We all have a responsibility to protect it. A young human scientist raised her hand. Director, is it true that you volunteered to be bait for the entity at Arcturus? Lisa smiled. Yes, and I was terrified. But being brave doesn't mean not being afraid. It means doing what needs to be done despite the fear. Did you think you were going to die? Honestly? Yes, I thought that shuttle run would be my last action. But Commander Morrison and Captain Zarthon gave their lives so I could escape. They gave me a future, and I've spent every day since trying to honor that sacrifice by making sure their deaths meant something. The young scientists looked at the memorial wall displaying images of Morrison, Zarthon, and the others who had fallen. They looked so normal, one Quellan scientist observed. Not like heroes from legends. That's because they were normal, Lisa replied. They were just people doing their jobs, making the choice to protect others instead of themselves. That's what real heroes are. Not legends or myths, but ordinary beings who make extraordinary choices. Months turned into years. The task force continued its work, monitoring seal sites, containing the occasional entity that broke free, and gradually developing new technologies based on progenitor knowledge. The dimensional trap that Lisa had devised at Arcturus became standard equipment on all task force vessels. New threats emerged. Not all dangers came from the Endless. Pirates, territorial disputes, and other conflicts continued across the galaxy. But now, when crises arose, the response was different. Instead of individual species acting alone, joint task forces responded. Human courage combined with Valorian honor, Quellan intelligence, and Palaxian precision. The galaxy had learned that cooperation was stronger than competition. On Earth, in a small park in the city where Jake Morrison had grown up, a statue stood. It showed two figures, one human and one Valorian, standing back to back. The plaque read simply, Commander Jake Morrison and Captain Zarthon. They stood together. We remember together. Similar memorials existed on the Valorian homeworld and dozens of other planets. The sacrifice at Arcturus had become a shared story, a founding myth of the new galactic civilization that was emerging. Director Lisa Bennett, now in her 50s, stood before that statue during a commemorative ceremony marking the 10th anniversary of the Arcturus incident. Survivors from that day attended, along with crew members from both the original Defiant and Radiant Dawn. 10 years ago, Lisa said to the assembled crowd, the galaxy was afraid of humanity. We were seen as dangerous, unpredictable, too aggressive for civilized society. And you know what? They were right. We are dangerous. We are unpredictable. We are aggressive. She paused, looking at the faces in the crowd, human and alien, young and old, military and civilian. But those traits, the ones that made us feared, are also the ones that saved 5 million lives at Arcturus. Our refusal to accept defeat, our willingness to sacrifice for others, our absolute conviction that some things are worth dying for. Those aren't flaws. They're strengths, and we share them with every species brave enough to stand with us. The crowd applauded, and Lisa felt tears in her eyes. Not tears of sadness, but of pride and hope. After the ceremony, she walked through the park alone, enjoying the peaceful afternoon. Children played nearby, human and alien kids together, not seeing differences, just seeing friends. A young girl approached her, maybe 7 years old. Are you Director Bennett? I am. My teacher says you knew Commander Morrison. Is that true? It is. He was a good man and a brave leader. I want to be like him when I grow up. I want to join the task force and protect people. Lisa smiled and knelt down to the girl's level. Then study hard, be brave, and remember that protecting people isn't about being the strongest or having the best weapons. It's about caring enough to stand between the innocent and the dark. I will. I promise. As the girl ran back to her friends, Lisa stood and looked at the statue again. Morrison and Zarthon, forever standing together, forever reminding everyone who saw them that courage and sacrifice transcended species boundaries. The Endless would come again. The seals would continue to require maintenance and monitoring. New threats would emerge from the darkness between stars, but the galaxy was ready now. Because humanity had shown everyone what true strength looked like. Not the strength to destroy, but the strength to protect. Not the power to conquer, but the power to sacrifice. Not the ability to inspire fear, but the ability to inspire hope. Aboard the USS Morrison, Captain Kixelar received a communication from deep space. Another SEAL was showing signs of stress. Another mission awaited. Set course for the coordinates, Kixelar ordered. And notify all task force vessels in the sector. We may need backup. The crew moved efficiently, preparing for whatever they would face. They had trained for this. They had learned from Morrison and Zarthon. They knew what was at stake. As the Morrison jumped to faster-than-light speed, Kixelar looked at the empty command chair that had once been occupied by his mentor, Captain Zarthon. Next to it was a plaque honoring Commander Morrison. "We carry on your work," Kixelar said quietly to the empty chairs. "We stand together as you taught us, and we do not surrender." The ship raced through the stars toward the next challenge, carrying its crew of humans and aliens united by common purpose. Behind them, countless other ships followed, all part of the network that protected the galaxy from ancient threats. On Earth, the sun set over the memorial park. The statue of Morrison and Zarthon cast long shadows in the fading light. Children's laughter echoed through the trees as families enjoyed the peaceful evening. Peace that had been bought with sacrifice. Safety that was maintained through constant vigilance. A future that existed because ordinary beings had made extraordinary choices. Lisa Bennett walked home through the quiet streets, thinking about everything that had changed. Humanity had come to the stars expecting adventure and discovery. They had found both, along with responsibility and purpose. The galaxy had feared the Deathworlders, the species that evolved in impossible conditions, that refused to die, that threw themselves into danger without hesitation. Now the galaxy understood. Those terrifying traits weren't signs of violence or aggression. They were signs of a species that valued life so much they would give their own to protect it. Humanity wasn't perfect. They still made mistakes, still acted impulsively sometimes, still scared other species with their intensity. But they had proven themselves worthy of trust, worthy of friendship, worthy of standing alongside the other great civilizations of the galaxy. And when the next crisis came, when new threats emerged from the dark, the galaxy knew who would be standing on the front lines. Not just humans, but all the species who had learned from them. All the beings who had discovered that courage and sacrifice were universal values, not limited to any one world or evolutionary path. The memorial satellite continued its eternal orbit around Earth, carrying the names of the fallen. Each night it passed overhead, a silent reminder that freedom and safety came at a cost, that some debts could never be repaid, only honored through living well and protecting others. In the council chambers, representatives from 47 species gathered for routine business. But now human representatives sat among them as equals. No longer feared, no longer questioned, but respected and valued. Ambassador Zixthar, now elderly and preparing to retire, reflected on how much had changed. He had been one of humanity's strongest critics. Now he was one of their strongest advocates. "I was wrong about humanity," he said during his farewell speech. "I saw only danger and aggression. I failed to see the compassion and courage beneath. They taught us that being civilized doesn't mean being passive. Sometimes civilization must be defended with strength. Sometimes peace requires warriors willing to fight for it." The council gave him a standing ovation as he stepped down from his position. His replacement, a younger Valorian named Silrath, approached the podium. "We honor Ambassador Zixthar's service," Silrath said, "and we honor the lessons we have learned. The galaxy is stronger now because we stand together. Human, Valorian, Quellan, Palaxian, and all the others. We are no longer just a council of separate species. We are becoming something greater. A true galactic community." Years continued to pass. Technology advanced. New colonies were established. The task force grew stronger and more capable. Entity breakthroughs became rare as SEAL maintenance improved. The techniques pioneered by Lisa Bennett and her team were refined and perfected. But the most important change wasn't technological. It was cultural. The species of the galaxy had learned to see each other not as competitors or threats, but as allies and friends. They had learned that diversity was strength, that different perspectives and abilities, when combined, were more powerful than any single species alone. Humanity's reputation evolved. They were no longer the scary Deathworlders. They were the protectors, the ones who ran toward danger instead of away from it. The species you wanted on your side when things got bad, and Earth itself became a symbol, not of danger or violence, but of resilience and determination. Millions of alien tourists visited each year, marveling at the beautiful but deadly planet that had forged such a remarkable species. In classrooms across the galaxy, young beings learned about the Arcturus incident, about Commander Morrison and Captain Zarthon, about the humans who used mining equipment to fight pirates, about Professor Bennett who volunteered to be bait for a cosmic horror, about the ordinary people who did extraordinary things because it was the right thing to do. The story became legend. The legend became inspiration. And that inspiration shaped a new generation of beings who understood that heroism wasn't about being fearless or perfect. It was about choosing to act despite fear, choosing to help despite risk, choosing to stand up when it would be easier to stand aside. Lisa Bennett, now in her 70s and thinking about retirement, gave one final lecture to a new class of task force recruits. When I first met Commander Morrison, she told them, I was annoyed. I was a scientist and I didn't think I needed a military escort. I thought weapons and warriors were unnecessary for archaeological work. She smiled at the memory. I was wrong. Commander Morrison taught me that protecting knowledge and protecting people are equally important. That scientists and soldiers need each other. That everyone has a role to play in keeping civilization safe. The young recruits, a mix of dozens of species, listened intently. You are the future of the task force, Lisa continued. The Endless will be your responsibility. The SEALs will need your vigilance. The galaxy will depend on your courage. But you won't face these challenges alone. You'll face them together, as we learned to do 10 years ago at Arcturus. She gestured to the memorial wall behind her, where Morrison and Zarthon's images were displayed. These two taught us the most important lesson, that the bonds we forge with each other are stronger than any weapon, that trust between species is more powerful than any technology, that when we stand together there is no threat we cannot face. The recruit stood and saluted, a gesture adopted across all species as a sign of respect and unity. Lisa saluted back, tears in her eyes, knowing that the legacy was secure, that the sacrifices made at Arcturus would continue to mean something for generations to come. As the recruits filed out to begin their training, Lisa remained alone in the lecture hall. She pulled up a holographic image of the original Defiant crew. Morrison, Clark, Cooper, and all the others who had served and survived. We did it, Jake, she said softly to the image. We built something that will last. Something worth dying for and worth living for. The galaxy you helped save is thriving, and we'll keep it safe. I promise. The image faded and Lisa walked out into the corridor. Through the windows she could see dozens of ships preparing for departure. Human ships, Valorian ships, Quellan ships, all bearing the emblem of the Endless Containment Task Force. The fight wasn't over. It would never truly be over. But that was okay, because every generation would have their heroes. Every era would have its Morrison and Zarthon. Every crisis would bring out the best in people, regardless of what planet they came from. Humanity had been feared as Deathworlders, as aggressive and dangerous outsiders, but they had proven themselves to be something far more important. They were survivors who refused to let others suffer. They were warriors who fought for peace. They were the ones who stood between the innocent and the dark, not because they had to, but because they could not do otherwise. And in doing so, they had transformed the galaxy itself, not through conquest or domination, but through example and sacrifice. They had shown every species what was possible when courage met compassion, when strength served justice, when individuals chose the hard right over the easy wrong. The sun set on another peaceful day in the galaxy. Children slept safely in their beds. Families lived without fear of ancient horrors. Civilizations grew and thrived under the protection of the task force. And on 100 different worlds in 100 different languages, parents told their children the story of the humans who came from a death world and saved them all. Not because they were the strongest or the smartest, but because they cared enough to try. The legacy of Commander Morrison and Captain Zarthon lived on in every being who chose courage over comfort, in every person who stood up for others, in every act of sacrifice, large and small. The Deathworlders had arrived. They had been feared and they had been tested. And they had proven themselves to be exactly what the galaxy needed. Heroes who refused to quit, protectors who refused to fail, friends who refused to abandon those in need. And the galaxy would never be the same. The end.